If you awaken from this illusion, and you understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, or shall I say, death implies life, you can feel yourself not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on probation, not as something that has arrived here by fluke, but you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental.
For my ceremonial speech, I will be talking about the great Eastern philosopher Alan Watts. He was born in London in January 1915, at the start of the First World War. At a young age, he became fascinated with the arts of the Far East, and by the time he was 10 or 11, he began to read thriller stories by Sax Rohmer about mysterious Oriental villains. This interest led him in turn to the works of Lafcadio Hearn, Christmas Humphreys, and D.T. Suzuki. And by the time he was 14, he started writing on Eastern themes and published in the Journal of the London Buddhist Lodge before producing his first booklet on Zen in 1932. Thereon, in 1938, he moved to New York and then to Chicago, where he served as an Episcopal priest for 6 years before leaving the church. In 1950, he moved to upstate New York, and in late 1950 he visited with Joseph Campbell and composer John Cage and Louisa Coomaraswamy at his Millbrook farmhouse. Then in 1951, at the invitation of Frederick Spielberg, he moved to San Francisco to teach at the Academy of Asian Studies. For his world views, Alan Watts was profoundly influenced by the East Indian philosophies of Vedanta and Buddhism, and by Taoist thought, which is reflected in Zen poetry and the arts of China and Japan. After leaving the church, he never became a member of another organized religion, although he wrote and spoke extensively about Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. Some American Buddhists actually criticize him for not sitting regularly in Zazen, which is a pose, even though he recorded several guided meditations, teaching a variety of meditation techniques. Alan Watts responded simply by saying, "A cat sits until it is done sitting, and then gets up, stretches, and walks away." In the 1950s and the early 60s, he was teaching at the Academy of Asian Studies in San Francisco, and then later on he became a dean. And then he began to give regular radio talks on KPFA, the Berkeley Free Radio station. In 1957, he published his best-selling Way of Zen, and in 1958, he returned to Europe where he met C.G. Jung. He was an early subject in pioneering psychedelic trials, and after recording 2 seasons of the public television series of Eastern Wisdom and Modern Life, he traveled to Japan and several times in the early 60s. By the late 60s, he had become a counterculture celebrity and traveled widely to speak at universities and growth centers across the US and Europe. For his later years, he became a foremost interpreter of Eastern thought for the West, and was widely published in periodicals including Earth, Elle, Playboy, and Redbook. He appeared on CBS's television's Camera 3 in 1969, and in 1971 he recorded a pilot for a new show titled A Conversation with Myself for NET, the precursor to PBS. When the series was not produced, he recorded the shows in 1972 with his son Mark and his longtime audio archivist Henry Jacobs. Overall, Alan Watts developed an extensive audio library of nearly 400 talks and wrote more than 25 books during his lifetime, including his final volume, Tao, The Watercourse Way. Unfortunately, Alan died in his sleep in November of 1973 after returning from an intensive international lecture tour. Currently, a film on his life and works is in production.